When is a sequel not a sequel? Is this a thought-provoking primer or a spurious cliché designed to give the impression of depth? Either way, this question was posed as the opening line to a preview of Quake II in an issue of GamePro magazine from January 1998. The game, having been released about a month earlier, was being hyped up by game journalists across the industry. Everyone expected this to be the new king, to knock off its predecessor from the top of the FPS mountain. History has not recorded this event, and even when aided by nostalgia, Quake II has not taken the crown. The reigning sentiment is that Quake II, though an important and influential technical achievement, lacks several elements of what made the original Quake so good. Today, Quake II is a divisive game. Opinions on the game are diverse.
Godspeed as well.
I absolutely love Quake II. It is, without irony, my favorite Quake game. Therefore, it is the best Quake game in the series. The question, of course, is why? What reason would a deranged individual prefer a proto-military shooter that hasn't been valued for its unique offerings, places large emphasis on the color brown in its never-ending hallways that seem to always turn back on themselves, which the game designers had the audacity to call levels consisting of never-ending industrial plants, military bases, sewers, reactors, mines? It's corny, but there's no other way to say it. It's the sum of its parts. It's no secret that the first Quake's soundtrack was an achievement for both games as a medium and the overall atmospheric feeling of that game. Sonic Mayhem, which was a collaboration between Sasha Dikichian, Bill Brown, and Jur Sippold, created this soundtrack for Quake II. And this might be the one aspect of this sequel that objectively surpasses its predecessor. The soundtrack is a hailstorm of face-melting riffs that complement the pulse-pounding action going on in the game. There's nothing like heavy distortion to drive a jib fest of cybernetic horrors. It should be no surprise that this soundtrack has remained a fan favorite long after the release of this game. The number one reason someone would give this a negative review on Steam is because the soundtrack is not included with the Steam purchase. This appears to be due to a web of complicated rights issues. Thankfully, Sonic Mayhem has been providing regular updates and historical corrections via YouTube comments as well as their multiple Twitter handles. The weapon selection in Quake II is somewhat unique. Every weapon feels like it has a purpose, despite there being clear replacements and use cases. Quick aside, is it weird that I still hit the number keys for my gun selections? Even in Doom Eternal. Anyway, here's our arsenal.
We got tactical smart missiles, phase plasma pulse rifles, RPGs, we got sonic...
It's our first slot, so it's gonna be something with our fists or an axe or... Oh, this seems to be a ranged emergency weapon with unlimited ammo. 1997's version of, look at our cool lighting effects. We aren't using the blaster for long, as we retrieve the shotgun pretty early. Great design on this, but in the late game, I really only use it when I accidentally hit the 2 key or I'm running low on shells. Which isn't really an issue in the base game, but in the expansions... It can be useful for flyers that are best taken out with hit scan weapons with higher accuracy. This is our bread and butter weapon. The first one you go for in most combat situations, and the one that gets the most mileage. Meaty, close range, highly effective, and puts out more damage than 2 equivalent shotgun blasts with the same rate of fire. It's also great for turning most enemies into a pile of hamburgers. This is our early game heavy firepower. Kills lower enemies quickly, does high damage at mid-range, but switch to the super shotgun if you get any closer. You spend so much time ducking behind walls that you can rarely maintain line of sight to do any significant damage. It ends up being used as a cleanup weapon to finish the job of what your other weapons started.
Quake II paint gun. The very best there is. When you absolutely, positively got to kill every motherfucker in the room, except no substitutes.
I've got a room full of heavy enemies bearing down, and I'm maxed out on bullets. I'd like to spend all of them, please. You can rest assured that every enemy in that room is dead, and quick. Like you know when Doom Guy's face scrunches up when you hold the fire button? That's what you'll be doing every time you let this machine rip and tear. It's the ultimate expression of your frustration with every straw that dares to even grunt in your presence. Finally, I can create polygonal explosions. This is not the old reliable from the first Quake, but it'll get the job done. Feels like it does more damage, but can easily melt off your own health if you're not careful, since it's best for closer range scenarios. It's better for individual heavy hitters rather than groups, like giving a gunner a taste of their own medicine.
Rocket launcher!
Strangely enough, this might have received the biggest change from the first game. This version is really only for heavy damage to slow-moving enemies. The design is fantastic and the damage output is good, but the rockets are slow. It's almost useless in multiplayer as your opponents are moving too fast for anything other than a lucky shot. What's more frustrating is that it'll cause gunners to duck, and that can be a waste of rockets if you forget to compensate. The concept here is neat. A rapid-fire energy cannon that does extremely high damage. Has a startup and stoppage delay like the Doom plasma gun. Problem is twofold. Projectiles are too slow, and I'd rather use the cells for the BFG and the energy armor.
Independently targeting particle beam failing. I have to seduce this puppy.
I always found it fun that id would make a sequel to the BFG. Like it didn't show up in the original Quake, but here it was again, stronger and more dynamic. Maybe not as well designed from an aesthetic point of view, but it also serves as a blueprint for the BFG as it appears in Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Like those games, I rarely used the BFG in Quake II as I was prioritizing cell use for the energy armor. Well, I think that's all of them. Pretty cool if you ask me. Definitely some standouts here, some fun changes, uses for existing tropes. Most of these have some use in the base game. Yep, let's see. We got shotgun, machine gun, super shotgun. I could have sworn there was... This is a celebration of everything that's fun about virtual shooting.
The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god.
The greatest concept and execution of FPS perfection distilled into one perfect release. Its gentle hum soothes you as you run through a body horror hellscape of alien, machine, and human hybrids. Your nerves calm as you hear it sing and resonate into the fibers of your brainstem, an unavoidable reptilian response to its potential energy. You and the gun are one. Then you see them, a usurper of peace, a polluter of spaces, a defiler. By showing themselves, the enemy has disturbed the calmest calm you'll ever feel. The memory of that perfect zen drives the entire sequence. Your hands, barely controlled by your conscious thought, move the barrel of the rifle ever so slightly. Your feet begin to step in sequence, easily avoiding whatever this petulant creature can throw at you. Your heart begins to slow. Your breathing stops. Its firing pattern locking in. You can feel its desire to pacify, to eradicate, to win back that peace you lost. And then it all comes rushing back. This attacker cannot be allowed to get away. You must deliver final justice. My earlier goof on the level design of Quake II is a relatively common knock against the game. I won't deny that there are progression issues. It's so bad that I edited a walkthrough I was using because I felt bad for anyone else having to navigate that part of the game. Why does something like this happen? I'm not a level design expert or even a game designer, but this is an early implementation of a hub-type system. I'm willing to bet that they overestimated the player's ability to remember inaccessible locations off the beaten path. If you're 2 levels deep, hit a switch, and unlock a hatch that's through 2 loading screens, might be tough to remember specifically where that hatch was, especially when it looks like 6 other hatches in the same unit. That's what the larger hub areas are called. They're called units. The issues begin, and I've always thought this, at the mines, which is Unit 4. For me, that's one ass hair above sewer levels, which is probably why there's close to little discourse about the original Red Faction. And most of that comes from me.
Oh god, not the Geomod technology again. Colin, no one gives a fuck about Geomod technology. What is Geomod technology?
The mine unit is also where I had to edit the walkthrough, so that should give you an idea about the player experience in that area. These stumbles are the exception to the rule. Most of the game makes it pretty clear where you're going next.
Initiate scan. Acquired personnel located. Logos, air threat neutralized.
Another common criticism is the texture work, which emphasizes the color brown. I believe these claims are over-exaggerated. The color palette, especially the skyboxes, is varied when it needs to be. I see the real issue being texture variance. Most things look pretty similar, but I think that is by design. The environments dip into the repetitive through the middle third, but collectively it feels like you're definitely on some other planet, not fighting on Earth, or any version of future Earth. It's a mix of industrial and military settings, oppressively large, and makes the player feel like a cog in a much larger machine. You are behind enemy lines. It's not supposed to feel comfortable or familiar. If you rank the units by how interesting they are, you end up with a reverse bell curve. The beginning and the end are the most interesting and diverse. The middle levels all blend together. The blending continues until you've completed Big Gun, when it starts to get interesting again. You start to enter a series of maps that I describe as a battle palace, a place that's ornate in its decoration and structure, but functions as a military stronghold. The final boss battle and the second secret level both take place on a space station. There's labs, warehouses, train depots, and even John Carmack's inner sanctum. Point is, there is variety here, more so than the game's reputation would have you believe. You just might not get the combat variety to match. As of this recording, if you want to play Quake II, it's relatively simple. This review was made using a source port called Yamagi Quake II. I tried a few, and this one rendered the game closest to how I remembered it. This port adds the ability to select and play several mods, including... My playthrough was on the Nightmare difficulty setting, what the game calls Hard Plus. This is actually a hidden difficulty in the base game. In this source port, the difficulty is accessible from the menu. id coded this difficulty with no pain states and increased attack frequency from enemies. This isn't really a problem in the base game, but really factors in when you try to play the expansions. I've beat this game about half a dozen times, but never on Nightmare. Never felt like it was particularly challenging, rarely died, not many situations or even enemy combinations that presented a significant challenge. The largest contributor to this is the energy armor. It absorbs a significant amount of damage from most attack types and uses your cell ammo as its power source. It reduces it so much in combination with something like body armor that it really feels like you're indestructible. I can't recommend that anyone play it on Nightmare since it wasn't originally released with the game. I can't say it adds enough of a challenge to be memorable or worthwhile. But that's kind of the point. You see, the single-player campaign of a Quake game has never been a grueling Souls-like endeavor, nor should it be. It's about the gunplay, the feeling that you're a rocket-slinging badass despite the oppressive world stacking the deck against you. It's about accessibility. Anyone can boot up a Quake game and just start playing. It's a common denominator experience written in a universal language for people who enjoy video games. Sounds like the kind of thing people would want to share. Multiplayer is a large contributor to the additive soup of this game's parts. This is the game I cut my teeth on. This is the game I learned to strafe. This is the game I learned to rocket jump with. This might be the first game I used WASD, which was non-standard at the time.
So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. No!
Quake II redefined the online experience. A game changer for competitive FPS as well as an industry primed to thrive off the incoming broadband explosion. It was like nothing that had been released up until that point. So different that magazine tips for multiplayer included a statement about the ineffectiveness of crouching to avoid attacks. To think that crouching was so new to multiplayer games that it needed to be mentioned. There is no doubt that playing Quake II online is the best way to spend every second of your waking life, but finding a decent server is the stuff nightmares are made of. This quote from March 98 is as true then as it is now. The surest and most authentic way to experience a multiplayer game of Quake II was to be fortunate enough to experience it in a LAN party. A private gathering of computers that were able to connect to the same host on a local area network. Usually you'd pick the newest machine to host the game. That was the one with the best video card. Your friends would all join on the older machines, but the game could run on pretty much anything in software rendering mode. That setup could lay the foundation for some of the greatest gaming stories ever told.
Did I double kill?
Tales of trading rockets and railgun kills from impossible distances, improbable grenade bounces, and swapping secrets of movement. If you were lucky enough to experience this back in the day, you lived a part of history.
Where did you come from?
The original Quake fueled an accelerated mod scene for Quake II, as fans of the first game attempted to return the weapons to the middle of the screen and increase the speed of the rockets. Some people went so far as to skip the single-player campaign of Quake II altogether. Quake II's mod scene is also responsible for the birth of Counter-Strike. A mod called Action Quake II was one of the most popular and included in an official expansion. Members of the development team went on to create Counter-Strike, and it is now a never-ending hellscape of skin loot boxes. Quake II has easy skin deliveries. Just copy and paste, and you can be playing some of your favorite characters like Darth Vader, RoboCop, John McClane, and everyone's favorite, Fart Blaster.
You know what I'm doing?
It is no surprise, then, that Quake III was multiplayer focused. This game might be the perfect case of loving something based on nostalgia. You remember things about it you enjoyed when you were younger. You don't remember that thing in perfect detail. You can only remember what you liked. Sometimes those things stand the test of time, discovering them anew with each revisit to the material. Sometimes they only exist in your memory, a combination of factors half remembered, and only fades as time passes. I think Quake II falls into the former category. Every time you revisit it, it will surprise you, and it will show you something new. You may not realize it, but the sum of its parts will add up in some new sequence and show you something that you weren't expecting. I know I like it, I don't always know why, but hopefully this video has helped me quantify that.
No.